From his current net worth of negative $2 million to the way he thought he was above the law, here's everything you need to know about the lavish car collection R. Kelly left behind after being sentenced and more. The world-famous singer has seen a dramatic fall from grace in recent years, and his current net worth sits at negative $2 million. Kelly's finances are in such a mess that it's breaking the laws of math, and you might be wondering how that's even possible. Well, it basically means that his debts exceed the value of his assets, which is kind of shocking when you consider just how filthy rich he used to be. At one point, R. Kelly was worth around $100 million, and he somehow managed to lose it all. But is this solely because he'll be rotting away in jail for 30 years? Not quite. You see, Kelly's always had trouble managing his finances, and it's fair to say that he's the only one responsible for that. After all, he enjoyed a pretty spectacular career starting in 1990 when he signed with Jive Records. He had a number of hits over the next few years, with tracks like Honey Love and Bump and Grind. And he even wrote hit songs for legends like Whitney Houston and Celine Dion. Even Michael Jackson hired this guy to write a track, and that's the sort of work that pays extremely well. Of course, when his career really started taking off in the mid-90s, he didn't really need to work for anyone but himself. Many of his records went platinum. He ended up selling 75 million copies worldwide. Despite all that, Kelly's secret life was sending everything into a tailspin, and his finances began falling apart in 2009 after his divorce was finalized. He married Andrea Lee at the height of his career in 1997, but by 2006, he'd filed the paperwork, and just 3 years later, the court ruled in his ex's favor. Kelly was ordered to pay her $1 million up front, $250,000 a year in child support, and an additional $10,000 a month in alimony. When you factor in the legal fees, you can see why Kelly's finances didn't look as good as they should have, even after all the earnings he got from royalties and whatnot. But you might be thinking, the guy was worth $100 million. That's gotta be enough to pay his required alimony and child support, right? That should have been the case, but unfortunately, Kelly has a history of writing off his assets because of his poor decision making. According to his childhood friend, Jem Pratt, Kelly had to sell the rights to his first 3 albums to his first wife, Aaliyah's family. Simply put, his marriage was straight up illegal, and in order to stop her family from pressing charges after a potential annulment, he decided to use some of his most successful work to pay them off. That ended up being a disastrous move because the royalties from those 3 records could have set him up for life. Some may argue that he had a lot going for him and still had enough money to live on, but this is simply not the case. According to court records, Kelly had fallen behind on his child support payments at least 3 times by 2014. He didn't owe Andrea any more alimony after she remarried, but the child support was still his responsibility. But Kelly tried time and time again to worm his way out of it. In 2013, he literally tried asking the court to reduce his payments by claiming that his popularity was declining. He also mentioned excuses like his age, the overall decline of the music industry, and plummeting record sales, but I seriously doubt he was being truthful. He literally performed at the Pitchfork Music Festival a few weeks before the filing, and that's not even including the concerts he did with superstars like Justin Bieber and Lady Gaga. So what exactly was happening here? His fans might say that his claims were genuine, and I would agree with that on some level. You see, Kelly lived a really lavish lifestyle, and he made some questionable financial choices along the way. His money was so poorly managed that he often didn't even know where it was going, and according to him, this was because people were stealing from him somehow. At the same time, his own track record is spotty at best. He bought a home in Chicago for about $3.5 million in 1999, but he had to take out a loan for the purchase. And by 2010, he still owed $2.9 million in debt. The home's value had increased to $5.2 million, but by this point, it had dropped to just $3.8 million, so he barely broke even when the bank foreclosed on it. His entire real estate portfolio has always been a mess, and around the time he asked for reduced child support payments, his massive 22,000 square foot mansion in Illinois sold for under $1 million. I'm no expert, But that sounds like pennies on the dollar for such a lavish estate, and it just goes to show how terrible he was at managing his affairs. This brings me to the most stunning reminder of the former star's absurd financial journey, the Atlanta home that got sold off in 2023. Kelly had been hemorrhaging cash for years, and when he was sentenced, the court ordered him to pay $500,000 from his music royalties. He'd racked up some unimaginable legal fees as well, so he needed money fast, and he didn't really have much left to sell. His Atlanta property was infamous for being the scene of some of his crimes, and it sold for approximately $1.7 million. That is an absolute steal for an estate that spans over 11,000 square feet, but beggars cannot be choosers, can they? To be fair, there's no way to know for sure if he sold it to pay off some debts. That is pure speculation on my part, but you have to admit that everything fits together almost too well. With Kelly now imprisoned, the abandoned estate was gathering dust, and a quick sale was the only move that made sense. This meant that he left behind some truly valuable items that give us a peek into his extravagant spending habits. Probably the best example of this is his ridiculous car collection. For starters, the guy owned a Bentley Continental worth an estimated $222,000, and that's if we're being conservative. This bad boy had an 8-speed gearbox, all automatic of course, and a 520 horsepower V8 that really shows how badly he wanted to be noticed while driving around. Oh, and did I mention it's colored sapphire blue? It sounds classy, I guess, but I'm only getting started. Apart from that, he left behind a Mercedes Maybach that literally had massage chairs with 12 different settings, not to mention a 12-inch screen for Kelly's viewing pleasure. The crown jewel of his over-the-top collection, the Phantom Drophead Coupe, is worth about $340,000, and if this is the first time you're hearing of this car, join the club. It's probably not even meant for us normies that follow the rule of law. Either way, these cars alone are worth over $1 million combined, and there's no telling how many others he hid away in his decades-long reign of terror. It's easy to see that Kelly loves spending money faster than he earned it, even if he had major responsibilities like supporting his own kids. What surprises me is that people still defend him, despite everything he's done. Kelly's stans seem like they live on a different planet, and no matter what their favorite singer does, they stand by him. Is it because they think that he's innocent, or do they just not see the seriousness of his crimes? Don't get me wrong, he made some decent songs back in the day, but that does not justify his harmful legacy. Even so, he has a fan base that's surprisingly active, which means that he might have a regular source of income while he's in jail. As much as I hate to say it, there's a good chance that Kelly will be okay, at least in terms of money, and that might be partly why he continues to have supporters out there. People tend to think that money solves everything, or even that it makes you above the law, and Kelly's definitely one of them. I'm not just being a hater here. His own actions show that he believed this. Paying off Aaliyah's parents, trying to skimp out on child support while buying luxury cars, selling off his homes to run from accountability, it's all part of the same pattern of behavior. Kelly assumed that just because he was rich, the rules didn't apply to him, and the cult of personality that formed around him only enforced that belief. In the end, he lost it all, and the legal system treated him just like any other criminal. So, from his false hope that his wealth made him immune to the law, to his net worth dipping to minus $2 million, this was everything you needed to know about R. Kelly and his abandoned car collection.